Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, it's Thursday. That means it's crossover Thursday. We'll break down all things Giants and all things Raiders on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 2nd, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show. Of course, as soon as it becomes available, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for making the show really blow up on YouTube. And thank you to my man, Ari. He does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube and we're looking good. You can hit up Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. Today's crossover edition, today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is going to be a little bit different. It is Thursday, so it's a crossover edition. So Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants, will join the show. We'll talk all things matchups. We'll talk about the path to victories, and we'll lead things off with storylines going into the game for the Giants and the Raiders. But because of everything going on with the team and the fact that Josh McDaniels is no longer the head coach and Dave Ziegler is no longer the GM, and we got an opportunity to catch up with Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly, the interim head coach and the interim GM, on Wednesday at the Intermountain Health Performance Center, I got to throw it back, man. I got to take it back to the days when we were riding in the car and you pop in a CD. And I said CD for the youngsters that don't know about these things. We didn't have our music on our phones. We had CDs, you know what I mean? And we had to pop that CD in, and we were on a long ride trip, on a road trip. What did we do? We just let that thing ride. Every single track was a heater, right? Going back in the days of Pac, All Eyes on Me. What was special about Pac, All Eyes on Me? Double disc, all bangers, special, right? They don't make them like that anymore. Well, I'm going to throw it back to the days of Pac. Q-Pac is back on this one, and I don't know why. For some reason, whenever the Raiders have big news happening, it always falls on a crossover Thursday or right around a crossover Thursday. So I got to do a double disc. So what I'm going to do today, because we got to keep the integrity of the Locked On Thursday, I don't want to go against the grain at all, so I'm not going to. So in disc number one, and I said disc for the youngsters, they're like, I don't know what that means. Just Google it. Just Google it. You'll figure it out. Anyway, we're going to do the crossover edition with Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants. She's going to join the show. We're going to talk all things, as I mentioned, storylines, matchups, key to victory. We'll even give you the who we think is going to win the game, score predictions, all that good stuff. We'll do that in disc number one. Disc number two will all be about Antonio Pierce. Will all be about Champ Kelly. Will all be about the direction that the Silver and Black is going, moving forward with them at the head coach and the GM position, as we got to meet with them on Wednesday at the Raiders facility. So we'll do that. You'll hear from them. Got a lot of good stuff. You'll hear from Ari Mayra from My Sports, from 33rdteam.com, talking about Jimmy G as he sat down, and Aiden O'Connell's going to get the start for sure come Sunday against the Giants. So we'll do all that in disc number two. Plus, we'll hear from you. Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line 707-654-4693. So let's get into the crossover edition. Before we do that, I do want to let you know that today's crossover edition is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. So again, let's just jump into the crossover edition. We'll do no news and notes of the day because we'll do that coming up in disc number two. So here's part one of the crossover edition. Patricia Traina, Locked On Giants, and myself talking all things storylines, Raiders and Giants. And, well, of course, as you know, there's plenty of storylines as far as the Raiders are concerned. Here's part one of our conversation.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and hello, Raider fans. Welcome to a special crossover edition. Locked On Giants, Locked On Raiders. The New York Giants visit the Las Vegas Raiders in week 9, and it's going to be a wild one. My name is Patricia Traina. I am the host of Locked On Giants, and of course, Raider fans, you recognize your boy Q. He is the host of Locked On Raiders, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We've got a lot to talk about. We got key storylines, we've got matchups, we got predictions, and Q, boy, you've got some storylines to talk about, my friend.
Yeah, I do, and that's the big thing. Now that Josh McDaniels has been fired, he was the head coach for the last year and a half with the Silver and Black. He was fired on Halloween night. How fitting is that, right? He gets fired on Halloween night, and you're talking about the Raiders, but he's out. The GM Dave Ziegler, he's out, and a guy that you know very well is in as the interim head coach in Antonio Pierce. So when it comes to storylines for the Raiders, it's all about how does this team respond to a former player that did it at the highest level, is a very intense guy. He was the current linebackers coach of the Silver and Black, and now he's the head coach. And I'll tell you, Patricia, we met with him today, or met with him actually on Tuesday. No, was it Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday. Man, my days, I'll tell you, my days just run together. But yeah, we met with him on Wednesday at the Raiders facility, and just the energy and the excitement. And I kept comparing it to a breath of fresh air, or almost that energy that you get when you go into a casino and it's supposed to be really, you're like tired, and it's late and you want to go to your hotel room and fall asleep. Then all of a sudden you walk around that casino for a little while, and that oxygen that they pump in there all of a sudden has you fired up. That's who Antonio Pierce is, and that's what he's done with Raider Nation. So the biggest storyline really for the Raiders moving forward, at least this week, is how did this team respond to Antonio Pierce as now the interim head coach?
Well, I know all about Antonio Pierce because he was just like that when he was with the Giants. Of course, he was one of the co-captains on that 2007 championship team. And, Q, the Raiders also decided to bench Jimmy G. They're going with Aiden O'Connell. How surprising was that to you?
Well, to me, it wasn't. I was actually the guy that was thinking that it was the time now. I had been kind of pushing off and telling Raider Nation that, yeah, it's too early. It's too early. They're still in the thick of things. But after you saw that performance on Monday night against the Detroit Lions, and the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs ran for more yards than the Raiders had offense in period, I was like, okay, something's got to give, right? He couldn't hit Devontae Adams. He couldn't hit a wide receiver in the first half. I thought, okay, at this stage of the game, you're 3-5. The Giants are coming to town, and I'm not sleeping on the Giants. I'm not sleeping on the Jets next week. I'm not sleeping on any of these teams. But you're at home. Why not let the rookie go ahead and give it a shot? Because obviously what you were doing with Jimmy is not working, and that's what Antonio Pierce told us. He said Aiden O'Connell is going to be the guy. He gives us the best chance to win. So that's what it is right now. And apparently the team was very fired up when he made that announcement on Wednesday morning.
And Q, before we get to the Giants storylines, I've got to ask you, I saw that the Raiders fired the offensive coordinator Lombardi, and they promoted the quarterback coach who, correct me if I'm wrong, he's never been a play caller. Antonio Pierce is more of a defensive mind. So what are the Raiders going to be doing as far as play calling? Who's going to, I guess it's going to be the new offensive coordinator here, but what concern is there? And, is it going to be a committee approach, or how are they going to handle that?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, right? That's a great question. Bo Hardegree, he was the quarterback coach. He's never been the offensive coordinator. He's never been a play caller, but he's going to be on Sunday, right? And so, what Antonio Pierce said and what the interim GM Champ Kelly said as well is that they've been with Bo multiple places, and he's not afraid of the moment. He's going to be ready for the moment. And the key thing is, and I know Raider fans will get excited about this, is they know the weapons they have. They know the playmakers that they have. And in Antonio Pierce's words, I'm no fool, right? Get the ball to the playmakers. So that's been something that's been missing. Shocking. Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers, Josh Jacobs, they haven't been used, in my opinion, the way that they should through 8 games so far. So their big key is going to be trying to get those guys involved and get the playmakers with the ball in their hands. But it's not, as an offensive coordinator, it's not an easy task. I mean, you've got to be able to play chess, not checkers. So it's going to be a learning curve for Bo Hardegree, but they have a lot of confidence in him. I think the players have confidence in him. So we'll see what it looks like on Sunday for his first time out.
Yeah, it's funny. After what the Raiders went through, to talk about the Giants' key storylines almost seems like, Pitkins here. But for the New York Giants, of course, they are coming off the heartbreaking and gut punch loss against the New York Jets in overtime. A game they had won, they should have won, and just they let it slip through their fingers. And, when you have that kind of a gut punch loss, it's always interesting to see how the team responds. Are they going to come back fighting? Are they going to be deflated? How are they going to respond?
Right.
Thus far, and the Giants, of course, back to work after a couple days off here. I was in the locker room today. I'm happy to tell Giant fans that the mood is upbeat. They feel, like, okay, we learned from this last one. We put it behind us. We're going to go forward. The Raiders, despite the problems they've been having, still a challenge. And just that level of confidence there is still there. Now, I think part of that is being fueled by the fact that the Giants are getting back some guys on offense. Right. Daniel Jones returns to the lineup after missing 3 games with the neck injury. Evan Neal, the right tackle, I have a feeling he's going to be back. He was very optimistic about returning. So that now gives the Giants back 2 offensive linemen, John Michael Schmitz, who was back last week, and now Evan Neal is coming back. So the offensive line is starting to resemble what it should be. We don't yet know about Andrew Thomas. I didn't see him, so I didn't get a good feel for, where he's going to be coming back from that hamstring. Now, one guy who is going to be missing is Darren Waller, who, of course, is the former Raider. Was looking forward to playing against the Raiders. Darren Waller injured his hamstring, and it's not the same hamstring that basically did him in with the Raiders. It's the other leg, and just, he's looking at potentially missing several weeks. So when it comes down to the Giants offense, some good news, some bad news. They're getting some guys back. They lost Waller, but they've got Saquon in there, and basically this is as complete of an offense in terms of personnel that the Giants have had in weeks. So they're going up against a very good Raiders defense. And of course, we'll talk about matchups coming up in a bit. But the Giants, it's all about the demeanor, which seems to be on the right track. And of course, getting these guys back and getting them in sync and just rebounding from, again, what was a terrible gut punch of a loss last week against the Jets.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I mean, especially losing in overtime the way that they did. You're right. That's a great way to describe it, a gut punch. But I did want to ask you, what do you feel like has been the biggest reason for the lack of success that they've had in 2023 after having Brian Daboll as a first-year coach get him to the playoffs last season? I felt really good about the job that Daboll did and thought now that he's got some more weapons and his own guys in there, he's really going to be able to do a really good job. Like, what has kind of been the biggest disconnect there?
I think you look at injuries. That's number one. That just, I've never seen a team this injured, and the Giants are always up or at the top of the list as far as injuries go. But I mean, to have your entire offensive line basically wiped out, you lose your quarterback for 3 games, you lose Saquon Barkley for a few games. Now you're going to be without, Darren Waller for a few games. Yeah. So that's one factor. But that being said, every team does have injuries. I think another problem has been, to a degree, the play calling and some of the decision making. Last year, Brian Daboll, very aggressive, wasn't afraid to roll the dice and do a little bit of gambling, keeping with the Las Vegas theme here. This year, he seems to have gone into more of a conservative shell. And there's just decisions that have been made that just, you sit there and you scratch your head and you say, what are you thinking, coach? Mm-hmm. And, he's going with the, analytics, and I get that, but analytics don't account for injured players. Right. A case in point, the attempt to kick a field goal with a compromised kicker, Graham Gano with that left knee injury had missed a field goal before. And at the end of the game now, he's kicking a field goal on 4th and 1. What, you've been trusting Saquon Barkley this whole time and you can't trust him to get 1 yard or at least take time off the clock? So just little things like that have done the Giants in, I think.
Well, it's like I said, I've been watching from a distance, but at the same time, I know your boots on the ground. So I thought that'd be a great question to ask you, because it's just, to me, I thought they were flying under the radar. Everyone was talking about the Jets coming into the season, and I thought the Giants were going to be the team you better watch out for. And obviously it hasn't shaken out that way, but I know they have a lot of talent, and I know Brian Daboll is a hell of a coach. So definitely not going to hold anything against them as they come to Allegiant Stadium on Sunday. It's going to be, I think, a heck of a game. So there was part 1 of our conversation, talking all things storylines between the G-Men and the Raiders. And of course, coming up in segment number 2, we're going to talk about the key matchups. What are we going to be looking for in this game? Because no matter what's going on with the Raiders, they still got to play a game. There's still a game coming up on Sunday. They're hosting the G-Men at Allegiant Stadium. So we'll get to that as soon as I tell you about DoorDash. And as you know, I have a busy schedule. If I'm not doing podcasts, I'm doing radio shows. If I'm not doing radio shows, I'm doing podcasts. If I'm not doing either, I'm at the Raiders facility or I'm somewhere, right, doing something. So I stay busy. I stay on the go, and I really don't have too much time to slow down. And when I get at the house and I do get a few minutes of downtime, and if the wife's not home, all of a sudden I look up and I think, uh-oh, now what? I'm a little bit hungry. What am I going to do? This is where DoorDash comes in handy. And there's even been times when, folks are coming to the house and maybe the wife went to work out or something. I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do? Well, DoorDash comes in handy there too because you can get groceries delivered to your house. So we have Smith's right around the corner from us. DoorDash takes care of Smith's. They go there, boom, they'll pick up your groceries. We have Pizza Rock. I love Pizza Rock. Boom, DoorDash goes there. Grimaldi's, same thing. DoorDash goes there. You can really help, stimulate the economy in your local area, as I do, by using DoorDash. And if you haven't used DoorDash yet and you need to download their app, you should do it right now because you can get 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app. But you got to use the promo code LOCK23, like Lock Jordan, right? MJ, Michael Jordan, Locked23, number 23, LOCKED, the number 23, subject to change. Terms apply. Again, if you want to get that discount, and who doesn't want to get a discount? It's 50% off up to $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app. Enter the code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. If you're in the back row and you didn't hear me the first couple times, it's all right. I got your back. Don't forget, use the promo code LOCK23, all one word, for 50% off up to $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app. Spend $15 or more, subject to change, terms apply. Get your grub on, get your groceries on, and do it with DoorDash. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to jump into part 2 of the crossover edition as we do each and every Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants, and myself breaking down the Giants, breaking down the Raiders. Week 9 action, Allegiant Stadium. We talked about the storylines in segment number 1. It's time to get into the key matchups, and there's multiple matchups that we'll be looking at in this game coming up on Sunday. So here we go, part 2 of the conversation, talking about the key matchups.
The first matchup, Q, I'm going to go first here without, being the visitor. The matchup that kind of scares me is Max Crosby against that Giants offensive line. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Max lines up against the right tackle, is it?
He does, but he's been moving around quite a bit this year. So
right.
He's
all right. So,
but the right tackle for sure. Yeah.
All right. So, right tackle. Again, it looks like Evan Neal is going to be back. Evan Neal, of course, has struggled this year. I don't know what's up with him, but he has not taken that step forward. And, of course, he's missed the last 2 games with the sprained ankle. When he was out, Tyree Phillips was in there at right tackle. And he was okay, but, still had some issues there. Now, over at left tackle, if they do move Max Crosby across from left tackle, if Andrew Thomas is not back, you got Justin Pugh, who's technically playing out of place there. So I'm curious to see how defensive coordinator and old friend Patrick Graham lines Max Crosby up. Is he going to flip him around? Is he going to put him exclusively on the right side? And moreover, with the Giants now down a tight end, again, I don't think Darren Waller plays. So if the Giants want to max protect, how are they going to do it? Are they going to run another offensive lineman out there? Are they going to chip Crosby with a running back? And how effective is that going to be? I think that's going to be a really, really big key for the Giants in terms of matchups.
I think that happens every week to the Raiders, right? In the defense and Max Crosby. I think every week it's like, where's 98? Where's 98? Where's 98? Because that dude is a wrecking ball, right? I mean, that guy just gets after it, and he has been moving around the defensive line quite a bit so far throughout the course of the year. The problem is that the Raiders haven't had anyone that's really complimented him, right? They went out and drafted Tyree Wilson, number 7 overall to Texas Tech, and he came in banged up with a foot injury, and so he's been kind of ramping up, and he's been getting better, don't get me wrong, but still, there hasn't been that guy to really compliment Max Crosby. So, yeah, he's going to be a problem for anyone, no matter what team it is and what the offensive lineman is. He's just that guy, right? Tackles for losses, pressures, and obviously sacks. He's so good at his motor never stops. So he's definitely someone to pay attention to in a major way. And, I look at, one of the matchups for the Raiders, and I'll stick with the defensive theme, is where's Saquon Barkley? I know how important he is to the success of the Giants offense. And there's a reason why, he was the franchise tag holder, right? There's a reason why he's the guy that, probably should have got bigger money than he really did, but we know the running back climate. We know what it is. The Raiders have been struggling to stop the run. They really have. I mean, they gave up so many yards on the ground to Jahmyr Gibbs on Monday night with the Detroit Lions. Scrimmage yards, 182 yards, right? And Saquon Barkley is all that and then some. He can catch the ball, he can run the ball. So the Raiders are going to have to figure out a way to focus in on Saquon. Where is Saquon at? How do you slow him down? How do you not let him wreck the game? Just like Max Crosby could wreck the game defensively, but Saquon could be a problem, just like rookie Jahmyr Gibbs was on Monday night. So I think that for Antonio Pierce, for Patrick Graham, first and foremost, what they have to do is locate Saquon and find a way to slow him down.
Very true. Saquon has made such a difference. I mean, last week he basically carried the Giants' offense,
Right.
especially after Tyrod Taylor, who was filling in for Daniel Jones, went down with a rib injury. Tyrod Taylor probably not going to play.
Doesn't he have the
I'm
worst
curious to see if he.
ever? Is it not his whole career has been like the worst luck every time he goes.
Yeah.
It's I feel so bad for Tyrod Taylor because I thought he was doing some pretty good things for the Giants until he got banged up again.
Yeah, but you know what? Dable, the head coach, basically said that when Daniel was healthy, he's coming back. Now, Daniel Jones continues to split the Giants fan base. So a lot of people hate him and a lot of people love him.
Right.
So, Daniel has, assuming that the neck is indeed fully healed and he doesn't have any further issues, he's got the rest of the year to kind of convince people that this team doesn't need to go out and get another quarterback come next year, which I think they're going to do anyway, because Tyrod Taylor's going to be a free agent and you see him get banged up, every time he goes out there. And, I question if Tommy DeVito, who's the third quarterback that they have had since the spring, I don't know if he's a long-term answer. And of course the Giants added Matt Barkley, who is familiar with Dable's system, having run it up in Buffalo. So Saquon Barkley, though, the straw that stirs the Giants' drink right now. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The receivers, I just don't see them getting open as much as you thought they would. And now that you lose Darren Waller, it's going to fall on Saquon's shoulders, basically, to help move those chains. So stopping him is going to be key, I think, for the Raiders.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's got to be one of the biggest focuses, and biggest matchups to pay attention to is that Raiders defense, the defensive line, locating Saquon Barkley and not letting him wreck the game. As far as other matchups, what else are you looking for the Giants when they look at the Raiders and say, okay, this is what, this is a big matchup as well. What else do you think besides locating Max Crosby and trying to slow him down?
Yeah, I mean, you would think Josh Jacobs, but I don't know if they've run him as much. Devontae Adams obviously would be a concern.
Yeah.
I think he's been frustrated, if I'm not mistaken, with his deployment. So I'm curious to see if with the new offensive brain trust, maybe they use him a little bit more, especially to test the Giants' young defensive secondary. That defensive secondary has actually played pretty well. You've got Deonte Banks, who has played well. Adoree Jackson will probably be in there, but he had kind of a rough game last week against the Jets. Trey Hawkins, who's a 6th-round pick, who was impressed, factors into that equation. So we'll see about that. But I would say that's probably it, because I would anticipate we'll see a lot of play action. I think the Raiders will probably keep things simple for O'Connell, I would think. I'm curious to see if they take any deep shots down the field. But, I would say definitely, Devontae Adams against that young secondary. I want to see if Josh Jacobs gets, more carries than he has. So, the Giants' run defense has been a little bit better. I don't think that would necessarily be the way to go. I think I would test the Giants' young secondary.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of what you just said. I think Josh Jacobs is going to have a bigger role. Antonio Pierce kind of alluded to that. He was saying how Josh Jacobs is still one of the best running backs in the league, and he knows his role moving forward and what they're going to be asking him. So I think he's going to have an expanded role, but you're absolutely right about 17. Devontae Adams has been frustrated. He's been frustrated for a while. There hasn't been any deep shots because Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't throw the ball down the field like that. And you saw him on Monday Night Football, Devontae wide open, and Jimmy throws it out of bounds and over his head, and it's just – it caused Devontae to go to the sideline, slammed his helmet down, say a couple of expletives. So he was pretty angry and fired up, and didn't know how the solution for the offense was going to come around. Well, now Josh McDaniels is gone. Aiden O'Connell has a strong arm. I expect to see some deep shots. And I expect to see them try to feed Devontae and get him involved because he is a playmaker. And, I do think it's going to be that 1-2 punch. Like, there's so many weapons that the Raiders have. I think you're going to see the ball spread around the field, but it's going to be led by 28. It's going to be led, or not 28, excuse me. It's going to be led by 8 and 17, as Josh Jacobs has changed his number this year to 8 as opposed to 28. But yeah, Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams, I think it'll be a good 1-2 punch between those guys to help do exactly what you said. Keep it simple for Aiden O'Connell, who's making his second career start. So there it is right there. The key matchups in this game coming up on Sunday between the G-Men and the Raiders. I think it's going to be a very competitive game. But what is going to be the key to victory? What is going to be the path to victory? Well, we're going to talk about that coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Disc 1, again, remember, we're going to have a disc number 2 where we'll have the news and notes. We'll talk about Antonio Pierce. We'll talk about Champ Kelly. We'll talk about the direction the team is going, and we'll hear from you. That'll be disc 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast for November 2nd. We'll get into segment number 3, and we'll get into part 3 where we talk about the story, not storylines, talk about the key to victory and give you a score prediction after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it's so easy to play, and that's what's exciting. I don't do fantasy sports, but I tell everyone to go use Prize Picks because it is so simple. Simple is better, right? They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's you against the numbers. You're not going up against other players, pros, sharks, none of that. You pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. It's as simple as that. Basketball season's here. You can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues, like LeBron James and Travis Kelce. A 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions, right? So, I mean, it's kind of cool to be able to do that as well. You want to play alongside some of the Prize Pick favorite players, like rapper Meek Mill, comedian Andrew Schultz. You can find community plays under the promo tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Also, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries, they stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. Football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with the injury insurance policy. All you got to do right now, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 and part 3 of the crossover edition. Patricia Traina, host of Locked On Giants, and myself talking all things Giants and Raiders. Of course, Week 9 action at Allegiant Stadium coming up on Sunday. We're going to get into the path to victory, and we're even going to give you a score prediction. I hate doing score predictions, but Patricia asked, so I got to deliver, right? So here we go. Let's jump into part 3 of the conversation. We'll talk about the path to victory and also give you our score predictions, who we think is going to win, who we think is going to take that L in part 3 of our conversation. Here it is. Check it out. Well, I didn't have a lot of confidence in the Raiders going into this game before Josh McDaniels and company were fired. I just didn't, just because the offense looks so broken, right? I mean, they're averaging 16 points a game. Now it's less than 16. It's around 15 points per game they're averaging. So that's just not going to win too many games unless you have the 85 Bears defense, and they do not. So, I mean, that's one of those situations where I'm like, wait a minute, man, this is getting worse before it gets better. But I will say this, and you've been around the league for a long time, so when there's a major shakeup, when there's a major change with, coaches, when sometimes the team goes through a little bit of adversity, you see teams come together. If not for the whole season, you see them come together for at least 1 week, right? I mean, I go back to when John Gruden had to resign and Rich Bisaccia took over. They went to Denver. They picked up a W. When the Henry Ruggs situation happened, right? I mean, it just seems like they all came together and rallied. I mean, there's different situations that happen with teams, not just the Raiders, but with teams in general, when there's all of a sudden a new voice, there's some kind of, like I said, there's some adversity that they have to overcome. You just see them start to rally around the guys. And I think, as you know, Antonio Pierce, man, I mean, when I was at his press conference, I almost jumped up and said, Coach, put some pads on me. I got like 3 snaps. I don't have much more, but I got 3 snaps. If you want me on special teams, put me on special teams. Because, I mean, he's one of those guys with that infectious personality. So I think he's going to be able to rally the team, get them fired up, get them home. I know this. He's rallied the fan base. And I think that's important. And the reason why is because every fan base, for the most part, has come to Allegiant Stadium and taken over. Not every single one, but for the most part, a lot of them. And I know that Giant fans are going to travel well. And I know that Giant fans are going to be in Allegiant Stadium and they're going to be representing. But I think that Raider Nation that was soured on Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler and the Patriot way, as they were calling it, right? I think that they were ready to not come back and ready to sell all their tickets. Now they have a reason to come and watch. I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to win every game, run out, win the playoffs, and have this Disney-made storytelling, but no. But they're just fired up to see something that's not what they were used to seeing for the last year and a half. So I don't know exactly how the path to victory is going to be. I think that Joshua Jacobs is going to be very heavily involved in Devontae Adams, as we talked about in segment 2. I just think that the Raiders are going to find a way to rally and win this game, and it's not because they're stellar and because of the play on the field. It's that dude on the sideline. I think Antonio Pierce is going to find a way to rally these guys and bring them together and win that game against his former team. What does that mean for the rest of the season? I don't know. But for 1 week, I do think that that is an X factor in this game.
You want to give us a score?
Oh man, now you're asking a whole lot, right? now you're asking a lot. Look, the Raiders haven't scored 20 points yet offensively this season. But again, it's not Josh McDaniels calling the plays. You know what I mean? So it's so much unknown as what we're going to see. Bo Hardegree, it's going to be a learning curve for him. What's he going to do as far as play calling? Is he ready to call plays in quarter number 1 to set up a play in quarter number 4? So it's tough to call as far as the total score. I'll just throw out 24-17 because I feel comfortable saying that. I don't think it's going to be anything outrageous, but I think these guys are going to be fired up. So I'm going to say that the Raiders will get the 24-17 victory. Maybe the Raiders defense scores a defensive score like they did last week against the Lions on Monday Night Football when Peters took a pick 6 to the house. Again, it's hard to make the score prediction, but I do think the Raiders find a way to win it just because they're going to rally it and not win one for the Gimper, but I think that they're just going to get one because they've had some adversity that they've overcome this week that's really tough to do. So as far as you're concerned, what do you think that what does it look like, man? What does the path of victory look like for the Giants?
I think the defense has been playing really, really well. They're going up against a rookie quarterback. Wink Martindale, as you've mentioned, throws the kitchen sink at the quarterback, regardless of, if he's a rookie or a 10-year veteran. The Giants, of course, they traded away Leonard Williams. I don't know necessarily that's going to totally, take all the air out of the tires of the Giants defense. I think the Giants defense is going to really, rise to the occasion. I spoke to a lot of the defensive guys today, and they are ticked off that they didn't shut down the Jets when they had the chance. So they could very well look to take it out on the Raiders. The offense, as I mentioned, they're getting some guys back. It does look like Saquon is going to be the straw that stirs the drink here. So I think the Giants, and it's interesting. The Raiders have the 31st ranked 31st ranked offense in the NFL. Giants 32nd. I think in this one, the Giants are going to upset the Raiders. According to the point spread, again, they're a 1.5 point underdog. Yeah. They upset the Raiders. I'm going to say 23-13.
Okay. It sounds like it could be a very low-scoring game if neither one of these teams' offenses are that good. It could be it very well could be both teams under 20 points. It could be like a 17-13 one way or the other, and that wouldn't shock me at all either. And yeah, Wink Martindale, like you said, he's really good. I respect him so much as a defensive coordinator, so I know he's going to get creative. And look, the Raiders, Jimmy G last week against the Lions took 6 sacks. So the offensive line, I know we already talked about matchups and all that, but the offensive line is going to have their work cut out for him because I know Wink Martindale, like you said, is going to bring and throw the kitchen sink at him. So that's going to be difficult, and it is a rookie quarterback. So I could very well see it going the other way. I just feel like with the X factor, the difference maker being the team coming together and rallying around Antonio Pierce for 1 week at least is going to be the separator between these two teams. But your prediction could be spot on, and it would not shock me at all, to say the least. Ball security is going to have to be a big key for both teams, as a matter of fact. So there it is. There it was. That's the crossover edition for today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 2nd, 2023. And as I mentioned, it seems like the Raiders always have something going on, and it's always around crossover Thursday. So even though I'm super busy, even though I've got multiple radio shows to do, I want to make sure that I keep everyone up to date on everything going on with the Raiders and, kind of my thoughts and my feelings as we got to have an opportunity to catch up with new head coach, the interim head coach, Antonio Pierce, interim GM, Champ Kelly at the Intermountain Health Performance Center on Wednesday. I thought that was a really good conversation. Really brought a lot to light. I think Raider Nation is pretty fired up about it. So we'll have it this too, right? We'll run it with another one. We'll go with this too. We'll take it back to the QPOC days for anyone who's been listening to the show for a very long time. So that'll come up next. Hopefully you enjoyed the crossover edition. Hopefully you're fully prepared for the game. Of course, on Friday, we'll have keys to victory. I'll give you what I think the Raiders are going to have to do under Antonio Pierce to be able to get a win on Sunday. But you heard what I told Patricia. I think the Raiders get it because, well, you know, they're gonna have that rallying cry, and they're going to rally around Antonio Pierce, who's going to provide a little bit more energy and juice to the Raiders organization. So we'll do this number 2. So go ahead, and if it's not already downloaded, make sure you download it. Enjoy it. This number 2 is on the way. If you don't get a chance to get it right now, maybe you'll get it later. Until then, whenever you get a chance to check it out, definitely take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.